Welcome to Nuanced Beauty, because the world is nuanced and we think that's beautiful. Hi guys, welcome back to Nuanced Beauty. This week I have another interview episode. I am chatting with Breanna. She and her mom, Lisa, launched Haven Bread Co. with the goal of starting a microbakery that allows people to be just as obsessed with sourdough bread as she is. This microbakery allows people to purchase organic sourdough and goodies every week. And I brought her on because I thought we could have a fun, nuanced conversation about sourdough making and running a small business. Breanna, welcome to the show.
Hi, thank you so much for having me.
I thought we could just get kicked off by asking the most nuanced and yet simple question ever. How do you make sourdough bread?
Yeah, I think, that is such a simple question, and some people find it very complex, but it truly is so simple. It is literally your wild yeast from your starter, flour and water and salt when you start adding that into the bread. And I think that you can go and find so many different recipes for sourdough bread, right? And
Mhm.
when we are making our sourdough bread, we have a few things that go into it. You have to have a super healthy starter, and that is something that's super bubbly. When you take a smell of it, it's going to be very yeasty and
It's like a going into a brewery
yes.
tour. Uh-huh.
Yes,
Yeah.
and then you're going to have your great flour. You can go all purpose or you could go to a bread flour, and then your filtered water and some really great salt that has a lot of nutrients into it. So before getting into the very complex of sourdough bread making, um, it's crazy to me that all you have to make a beautiful loaf of bread on top of a very nutritious loaf of bread is flour, water, and salt.
Uh-huh.
And that's just amazing to me. But to go into the depth of how to make sourdough bread, so 8 to 12 hours before you're wanting to make the dough for your bread, you're going to feed your starter. So you have already an active starter that is wild fermented yeast.
Mhm.
And that is
Now, let's talk about the starter
yeah.
because Bill and I have both dabbled, and I don't know. He tried to do one variety, I don't remember, and then the starter I tried, I used orange juice and flour. You're laughing at me over there. I'm dead serious. Something about orange juice, adding orange juice and not just the water and
Yeah.
flour, it allowed the yeast to like happen.
Yeah, to thrive maybe a little bit
It
more,
did.
and
It
I'm
thrived
sure
more than just trying like the totally, I don't know, with just flour and water.
yeah, it's
How did
probably
your
that.
starter?
Yeah, my starter actually is from a friend who dehydrated her organic starter.
Oh, okay.
So I revived a dehydrated starter, and that's the one I'm using currently. But yeah, you literally, like you guys were trying to do, you can make starter in your home with just flour and water. And through that
Yeah.
process, naturally, wild yeast starts fermenting because of that flour and the bacteria that can happen.
It's gonna find, yeah, and it's
Yeah,
going to grow and
yes,
take, uh-huh.
and become fermented, and that's what that starter is fermented flour.
Uh-huh.
And so you can have all those different varieties, and a lot of people use different types of flours in their starter, like buckwheat or other types of grains. And then also I've heard people, if their starters are like a little bit sluggish and isn't getting as
It
um
wasn't ballooning as much. Like, for the husband's starter, I just remember, like, trying to get it to double in size or whatever in
mhm.
the container or mason jar, marking the level and everything, and it just wasn't wanting to really rise, and it wasn't doing great.
Yeah, and there's a lot of tricks to try to get your starter to be happy again, and one of them is to add sugar to
Oh, okay, so
so that
that's what the
orange
orange
juice.
juice, sugar, okay,
Yeah,
okay.
yeah. So, but yeah, the when before creating or starting your dough to make actual bread, you want to make sure you have a healthy, bubbly starter because
Mhm.
otherwise you're going to get a
It's lame. It's a firm brick.
yes, exactly. It's going to be dense and gummy and not the greatest. So to have that healthy starter, you'll probably have to have. So prior to making bread, if anyone is wanting to do that, you are going to want to start that starter process if you do not have a starter like a month before making a loaf of bread,
Mhm.
because you want it happy and healthy and bubbly and just thriving before you try to make bread. And so, but 12 8 to 12 hours, depending on how the temperature of your home is, how the temperature of the water that you're feeding the starter with is going to
Okay.
all impact how
How it does.
when that starter doubles.
Okay.
um, so 8 to 12 hours prior to making dough, we feed our starter.
Mhm.
And then 12 hours later, for the most part, we start making our dough. So your dough is in a large mixing bowl would be add your starter. On
Mhm.
a kitchen scale, we measure by grams, and so we're just a lot more precise in our.
Then, like, taking a cup of flour because you could have a different, like, the how heavily you pack the
Yes,
flour.
yes,
Okay, yeah.
exactly. So we're very just precise on our measurements, and so everything that we're making is all similar. And
Mhm.
so you start with your starter in the mixing bowl. You add or your water, and then you're going to add your flour and salt. You're going to mix that up. You want it to. It's going to be like a shaggy mess. It's going to be a dough ball that's not very fun.
Uh-huh.
And I actually don't take a even a kitchen utensil to it. I take my hand because
Okay.
you just mush it and squeeze it, and it's going to be kind of that shaggy, sticky mess. And
Yeah.
that's okay. That's what you're gonna do.
That's what it's gonna be. Yeah,
Yes,
yeah.
and then you're gonna scrape the excess off your hands, and then you're gonna throw a damp tea towel on top of your bowl, and you're gonna walk away from it for probably 45 minutes to an hour.
Okay.
Once you come back to that bowl, it's gonna be kind of the same look, but it's going to be a little bit glossier, and it's going to look like it's incorporated together a little bit more.
Mhm.
So then I take a wet hand. So I have like a bowl with water next to me. I throw my hands or my hand into it, depending on how many loaves you're working with in front of you. And
Mhm.
you're going to do your stretch and fold. So this is what helps develop the gluten in your bread, so it's strong, and you're not going you're not going to get such flimsy or
It
a.
kinda gives you that, like, bounce back feel, right?
Yes,
Okay.
yes. So you're gonna develop the gluten in the bread by your stretch and folds, and so we do 3 to 4 sets of stretch and folds. I usually, even if I'm doing one loaf, all the way to 20 loaves in the same
Okay.
container. The more loaves, the more stretch and folds I usually do because
It's a workout.
it is
Yeah,
it
20 loaves. That would be a lot of, yeah, okay.
yeah, that's 40 pounds, 40 pounds. So with the one loaf, I do stretch and fold. So if you go to YouTube and look that up, you can kind of see that demonstration. With the 20 loaves, I do coil folds.
Oh, okay.
It's basically almost the same thing. It's just you're working the dough a little bit differently.
Mhm.
And so you're going to do 3 to 4 sets, like I said, with about 30 to 45 minutes in between the sets.
Okay.
So after the stretch and fold, you're going to let it sit. And this is called bulk fermentation. So it's going to sit between 2 hours all the way to 12 hours. And that's all dependent, again, on how warm or cold your water was and
Okay.
how warm or cold your house is.
And you're watching the dough for, like, a change in size?
Yes, so you're watching the dough for change in size. If you were to have, yourself or in front of yourself a glass mixing bowl and you're only doing one loaf, you want probably a 50 to 75% in rise in
Okay.
front of you.
So
Um,
50 would be double, or no, not double.
no, not double. So,
Like,
like, if you were, if it's sitting at the third of the bottom half of the bowl, you're going to want it to maybe get to that half of the
oh,
bowl
okay. Okay.
or a little bit above that half bowl.
Okay.
Um, and then with our microbakery, we actually take temperature. So we have a meat thermometer, and
Oh, okay.
we take temperature of right when the starter hits the dough. we start taking temps. And that all is the science behind when our dough should be ready to shape. So when the bulk fermentation is done,
Okay.
and there's kind of like a science behind that with the
Uh-huh.
temperature of your house to the temperature of the dough.
Okay.
So bulk fermentation happens where you don't touch it. It just sits on your counter. Some people, in the winter months, they put it in their oven with the oven light
Oh, the
on
light.
because
Yes, we tried that to get it to rise because the
yeah,
oven light just produces a little warmer environment than what our countertop was.
yes, exactly.
Mhm.
And so once you see your dough in that 50 to 75% rise range, you're going to take it out in front of you and you're going to dump it onto a lightly floured surface on your table. And that's when you start shaping. To shape, there's so many different ways. I like just throwing that ball of dough in front of me and taking every corner and kind of putting the corner into the middle of the dough. So you're kind of just going around that circle of dough and throwing it in the middle. And then you're going to take that seam side down and then you're going to start, um,
Like tucking it? Is that
yeah,
when you tuck the
yeah, you're
okay.
gonna like push and pull the tuck to create tension on top. So
Mm.
that skin of the dough becomes tight and taut, and that's providing a lot of tension on your sourdough loaf that is going to produce a better rise in your bread loaf when it bakes.
Mhm.
So we do the shaping twice, just because that provides a lot more tension in the dough, and creates a better rise and a better crumb inside of your loaf. So the crumb is kind of when you cut the loaf of bread in half, that beautiful airy pockets that you see in sourdough,
Mhm.
that's called the crumb.
Okay.
Yeah, so then you shape it twice. In between that, you let it bench rest for 20 minutes, shape it again, and then you throw it in your banneton. So the banneton is those wood bowls that you see a lot of people on social media use, that they're dumping their sourdough loaf onto their little bread mat and making those beautiful scores. That wooden bowl is the banneton.
Okay.
And so,
And is there like a reason for using the wooden bowl then instead of
um,
like a stainless steel or something?
yeah, so the wooden bowl or like the certain bowls that you use, it doesn't really matter. I think, to be honest, in my personal opinion, this is totally my opinion, the wooden bowls I think are more of that beautiful factor of sourdough versus a
Okay.
sciencey reason why wood
Okay.
is better. I
Okay.
know there's some places that use it for like eco-friendly and all those other
Uh-huh.
reasons why you would use it, but because they're so expensive, if you go on
Yeah.
Amazon, you'll see the dollar signs behind them, but they're like $10 to $15 a piece.
Oh, wow. Okay.
So we actually use they're called fruit baskets, but they're like this material that will not leach into food, and we
Okay.
use 100% cheesecloth to go on top of them, and then we put our sourdough loaf inside, but they're $2 a piece. And so
Ah.
we for our
Save a few dollars, especially for how many loaves you're making. Like, you're not
yes.
just making one loaf.
Yes,
Yeah.
exactly. So if you are planning just to have, make some loaves for you and your family, like buy a sourdough kit on Amazon. That's how I started. But there is not a reason for you to buy, $20 bannetons if you're going to want more
To
bannetons at your
scale.
house. Mhm.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Cool.
So once that sourdough loaf goes, after you shape it, goes into the banneton, this is when we cold proof. So cold fermentation. So you're just elongating that fermentation that was on your counter. You're now putting it into the fridge. It's still fermenting. It's still getting all of those great health benefits of fermentation. You hear all the time fermented food is great for your gut, like pickles
Mhm.
and sauerkraut and all those things. That's exactly what is happening inside that sourdough loaf. And we're just making it, we're prolonging it by putting in the fridge, but slowing it down, because if we were to keep it on our counter, it'll keep fermenting at a faster rate because it's still warm in your house. It's probably still warm in your dough.
Mhm.
So we're putting in the fridge, so then we're able to ferment it for 16 more hours to keep getting those fermentation benefits.
Okay.
And I personally like,
Do you
um,
feel like the rate of fermentation, do you feel like it changes the flavor, or have you just did some reading about like the benefits of a slower fermentation is better health-wise or
So both. So the
okay.
longer it's in the fridge, the more tangier it's going to be, that
Oh,
sour
okay.
taste, because that sour taste is from that lactic acid that's
Being
in.
released from the
Yeah,
process.
yes, exactly.
Okay, okay,
And so the longer that fermentation happens, the sourer it's going to be. The dough is actually souring from that acid.
okay.
And then, because you could just shape it, put it in your banneton, let it rise a little bit more on your counter, and bake it right then.
Yeah.
And you still get benefits. But I personally like a little bit more of a tangier taste. I like it provides a little bit of a chewier crust that sourdough gets.
Okay,
And then I really like having that the benefits of just a cold ferment.
okay.
So then the next morning we take it out from your banneton, you plop it on a parchment, some parchment, and then you're going to score it. So you're going to have, if you have seen anyone score a loaf of sourdough, I'm sure on your social media, because it's everywhere.
Yes, and
Um,
really quickly before, like, talking about, like, s specifically for scoring,
mhm.
what's the purpose of scoring a
Yeah,
sourdough loaf?
yeah. So scoring a sourdough loaf, you can have an expansion score. So that's going to be that big long score that's deep, that you would see if you look up a video of sourdough scoring, and that's going to allow your loaf to expand and get that big beautiful belly rise that you see in a sourdough loaf.
Okay.
Those pretty
Little
little wheat,
notches?
yeah, the wheat
Uh-huh.
stalks that you see on people's loaves, or the flowers, or if you've been on social media anytime around Valentine's Day, the hearts and all those beautiful things. That is just more the art of sourdough, like how
Okay.
you can make it be a piece of art in front of you.
Okay. That's
So those
cool.
are not necessary. It's just more fun and making your bread beautiful.
Uh-huh.
But the expansion score is necessary, because otherwise, if you do not, and this actually has happened to me. I've even done an expansion score, but I haven't gone deep enough on like the bottom side of my bread, or like if you're looking at a loaf of bread, the lower half of the bread,
Mhm.
it doesn't expand, and so it just, like, my top half of that bread just like out, like it just is like this big lump that goes, because
Okay.
all the um
Like, the inside wants to rise, and
yes,
if you don't do it, it's not gonna rise, it's just
yes.
gonna stay like a dense block, kind of?
Yeah, or it's gonna, like, poof out on the top, or
Oh, like
wherever there can be, like, an air pocket that, like,
okay.
the crust was thin enough, it's gonna poof out.
Oh, gotcha.
Yeah, so the air bubbles in that sourdough, it wants to release, it wants to get out and rise. So,
Okay.
that expansion score allows you to do that.
Okay.
So we currently, because we do not have the tools to open bake, or we don't have a bread oven yet, we bake in a Dutch oven. So that's how you're going to see a lot of people bake sourdough, is in a Dutch oven, and that provides the steam and the moisture that sourdough needs to have that rise in your bread. So it's not like a loaf pan of bread that you can just throw it in a loaf pan and throw it in your oven. The Dutch oven is for a purpose. It's because that steam is needed for the rise of the bread.
So it's a covered Dutch oven?
Yes, it's a
Oh,
covered
okay.
Dutch oven.
Gotcha.
So you're gonna, after you do your scores, you're gonna lower. You're gonna actually, while you're doing your scores, I usually preheat my oven for an hour prior to baking with my Dutch oven inside.
Oh, to
At
have it at okay.
Yeah,
Yeah.
to have it, and I usually preheat at 480 degrees for an hour. And then when you are done scoring and that Dutch oven is super hot and nice and hot for you, you're gonna throw your loaf of bread inside of that Dutch oven and have the cover on. I actually throw a few ice cubes in there because it just
Add a little more
produces a lot
steam?
more steam,
Oh,
allows
okay.
that rise to happen.
Okay.
And then after 22 minutes, you're going to take the lid off and you're going to lower your oven temperature to 450 degrees. And that's going to allow that browning effect to the sourdough loaf.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah. And then once that's done, you'll wait another 15-20 minutes, depending on your oven. You let it cool. I do not cut into my loaf of bread for 3 to 5 hours after cooling,
Okay.
because if you cut into a hot loaf, if you do not have a very sharp knife, it can produce like a gummy texture in
Uh,
the bottom half of your sourdough. So
okay.
I know it's hard, but
You
You
just
can
want to
just
cut it because you're
yes.
like, oh, I finished baking bread. My house smells so lovely.
Yeah.
Like, what is going on?
Yes.
Okay.
So, yeah, and so you cut into it at
Patience.
3 to 5 hours. I know it's a, like a 20 well, it's actually like our process is 36 hours. That 36-hour process is it's you're like, "I wanna just cut into this loaf. I wanna see the
I'm
beauty
ready.
of it."
Yeah. Like, how did I do?
Yeah. So,
Oh, man.
yeah, so that's how we make a loaf of sourdough.
So, I love that, and I just want to draw attention to the fact that, that first question took us 20 minutes. And not as like I think you did a wonderful job explaining, but just to like kind of point out like, man, there are so many just little tiny variables that can just change up what your process looks like. And for some, you might look at that as like way overwhelming and not worth it, but for others it's like, oh,
Mhm.
like maybe you want to lean in because you think that that's kind of cool how you can tweak something just a little bit and get a slightly different outcome.
Yes.
And that's where the beauty comes in.
Yes.
Um,
It is such a science, and, another thing just to add real quick is I love how sourdough can when you cut into it, like I was saying, that crumb can tell you so much of the story of what your process was. And
okay.
it will tell you what you did or didn't do. And so it is a science, and it's super rewarding when all of a sudden you get your like quote unquote perfect loaf in the
Uh-huh.
eyes of sourdough, you know,
Sourdough connoisseurs.
yeah,
Okay.
and you can go on Google and look up, like crumb mapping, and it will tell you like you underproofed it or overproofed it or etc.
Okay.
And so yeah, just it is a science, but it's such a labor of love, and like you said, just lean in if that's something that excites you and gets
Uh-huh.
you busy in the kitchen. It's fun.
Yeah, yeah, to expand your skills and just learn something new. Okay, now I feel like many people jumped on the sourdough making bandwagon back in the days of COVID. At the time, my husband and I we were living in Seattle, and it like felt like everyone was asking themselves if the store was out of bread, could I make a loaf of bread on my own? Or like maybe someone was like, oh, I'm so isolated in my house. How am I going to spend my time?
Mhm.
And so people just wanted to make sourdough. And my husband was one of them. That's why I have a little bit of context for making the starter and learning a little bit about the process. And then we gave it a try here as well. I didn't stick with it. I
Mhm.
am now buying my bread from Breanna here. Um, but I feel like the reasons for making sourdough is far and wide, and it really like took off in the days of COVID. So I'm wondering, did you notice a similar trend wherever you were at? And like, when did you start making sourdough?
Yeah, that's so true, and I love how during that time, so many people went back to what our ancestors did, and
Yeah.
that's when sourdough boomed, because yes, it definitely became a trend where we were at. We were in Atlanta at that time. My husband was going to chiropractic school. And that's also where the time that we kind of started diving into like the natural health world space. And I
Mhm.
think that's where I found out more about sourdough was all of, the people you follow on social media, they were all starting to make sourdough. And so my actual community, in-person community in Atlanta, I think I only had one other friend who made sourdough, and, but that's where I was more encouraged to try, and so I did start trying my first time in the summer of 2020,
Okay.
and, I failed miserably too at that time. I tried to make my own starter, and I thought, at day 6, I could make a loaf of bread, and I couldn't,
Okay.
because it was this dense brick of a loaf of bread, and, I think I did a few discard recipes, and, I slowly gave up because it just wasn't, it was more frustrating than anything,
I think the one thing that we reminisce is the discard recipes. Like we made just a rosemary cracker,
Yes.
like a discard cracker recipe, and it was like, oh, that was so good.
Mhm.
So there was some joy in the discard and the failure there.
Yes,
Uh,
exactly. And so after that failed attempt attempt in summer of 2020, I started again December of 2021. And that's when my mom and I both got our hands into the dough a little bit more and started to actually fall into in love with the process of sourdough.
Okay. That was you said December of 2021?
Mhm.
Cool. Um, and why do you enjoy making sourdough bread?
Well, I love the process. The 20-minute process I just told you guys all about. I really do love it. I think it's so fun. My mom, on the other hand, if you were to ask her, she would say it's more frustrating than fun. So,
It's like a beast that she's trying to overcome or tame?
yes, yes.
Okay.
And she loves doing all the discard recipes like you just said of we offer a variety of things and she loves doing the discard. I'm the bread gal and I'm fine with that because I love it. It's such a labor of love. I love the taste of sourdough. I don't think I can after it's 2024, so 3 years that I've been making it. I really don't think I've had another piece of bread in 3 years,
Oh,
and
cool. So it's totally like it's not I guess in your case, it you didn't add sourdough to your, like, bread eating, like, it replaced
Mhm.
the breads that you were eating.
Yes,
Okay,
yes.
cool.
And I love the taste. I also love the health benefits, like I've touched on a few times. Like it is so nutrient dense. The nutrients, because of the fermentation, are way more bioavailable into our
Mm,
bodies. It's a prebiotic, which is super great for our gut health. That's why a lot of people who have maybe gluten intolerances can eat sourdough is
mhm.
because all that work that the bread is doing for you during that fermentation process, it's literally eating the gluten. So
Yeah.
our bodies don't have to digest it.
Mhm.
And then, like I said, like the digestibility of sourdough, it provides it provides a lot for our family. So I love the process. I love the taste of it, and the health benefits are great.
Nice. And then what led you to start this business?
Yeah. Um, so I was in the tech field prior to this, but I was making sourdough on the side. I was probably making 5 to 10 loaves a week. And
Wow,
I was
that's a
just
pretty decent amount.
yeah, I loved it. It was super fun. I was a new mom, and it was just a very much of a passion. I loved giving them to friends. We would like trade. I would get fresh eggs from someone. They would get some
Nice.
sourdough for me. And for me, if I were to receive a loaf of bread freshly baked from a friend, that's like such a beautiful gift in my eyes because of the intentionality behind it.
Mhm.
So I was doing that. I was just trying to perfect my craft. And so I was giving a lot of our loaves away and we were also consuming them because how can you not? And so when this last fall of 23, I actually got laid off. And so when I got laid off, I was like, okay, well, I'll just stay at home with my little baby and I will just keep trying to look for work. And my community around me and in my mom's neighborhood, we went to like a block party and we brought sourdough. And then all of my friends knew did sourdough and they were all like, why don't you sell your sourdough? And I was just like,
Okay.
I like I can't do a brick and mortar. Like we don't have the money to do that and all
Yeah.
those things. And then I found out about cottage bakeries, which there's cottage food laws and then cottage bakeries, which is what we are. And that's kind of what led me to start my own business was just the encouragement of my community. I already loved it. It was a passion of mine. And then something I kind of perfected as my craft, which is really cool.
Okay. Now, how would you define a microbakery then?
Yeah, so the difference between a microbakery and a cottage bakery, they're very much, in my eyes, they're the same thing. So a microbakery is just a small scale bakery. In my eyes, it's kind of like what we're doing is porch pickups, or maybe they have a storefront in the front of their house, or in a shed on their property. It's just a very small scale bakery that's not commercialized, and so cottage bakery kind of entails into that. So when I say cottage bakery, it's because we're under cottage food law, which means that we're not in the jurisdiction of the FDA.
Mhm.
So there's laws for cottage food. Like we cannot do certain things, as in we can't sell cream cheese frosting that has actual dairy in it because it will spoil if it sits on someone's countertop. We
Mm.
can't sell refrigerated items in Florida anyway. There's other food law or cottage food law in different states. So we can't sell frozen cookie dough, or we can't sell just bread dough. We have to have everything baked. It has to basically not spoil on someone's countertop for, right away, as in like dairy or something like that. So in my eyes, a microbakery and cottage bakery kind of go in hand with each other, but a microbakery is just a very small scale bakery.
Operation. And
Hmm.
it sounds like that really is what allowed you to get into it, is that they have this option out there. So you're not like a commercial large brick and mortar. It's so your startups are make it even possible for you to
Yes.
do it.
Yeah,
Okay.
exactly.
Is there anything in particular with starting the business that has gone much smoother than expected?
Yeah, I think for us, the ordering process for our customers, we've heard great feedback. So anyone who has a small business, kind of like ours, a good service, we use Hot Plate, which is our ordering platform, and it provides us as the seller great information. It's very easy to use. It accepts payment, which is amazing. We don't have to deal with that. It shows our customers that we are an actual business. Like, we're not accepting cash and stuff through Venmo unless we're at, farmers markets and stuff.
Mhm.
But like, I feel like that has gone so much smoother because it allows our customers who don't know necessarily about us, because we aren't a brick and mortar. We are literally in a residential
Word of
home.
mouth conversation. Yeah.
Yes, and
Yeah.
a porch pickup. So we aren't necessarily, that typical bakery you think of. So I think that ordering process of having something standardized and something super easy to use, it allowed them to trust us. Number
Mhm.
one, and number two, for them to get all the information they need, as in addresses, and it just in a text message reminders, and it's just such a smooth thing. I have really, really enjoyed Hot Plate, which is what it's called. And then we've also, something that's gone super smooth, which I didn't know it was going to, was like our marketing and gaining customers. It has been amazing. Like, we started 3.5 months ago, and this week are maybe 2 loaves away from selling out.
Okay.
And so we are completely at capacity, which is super awesome for what we have in our home bakery right now. So that has gone so much smoother. Just word of mouth marketing, social media, partnering with a lot of our local people in Jacksonville to have them actually try our stuff and give us honest feedback, and really only share us if you love us. Don't share us out of because we
Out of
gave you
like guilt or
yeah,
something. Yeah.
out of free bread. So
Uh-huh.
that's been really awesome.
That's cool. Is there anything in particular with starting the business that has gone much harder than you thought it would?
Yeah, I think anyone who has started a small business, I'm sure, could maybe agree with me, as just like the legal things of it, like getting your LLC, your bank account for your small business, just like all that administration tasks.
Mhm.
And then another thing, just for in particular for ours, and this is more so probably a me thing, but is just organization and the time management of being a stay-at-home mom with a little, on top of owning a small business, is just like making sure you have your ducks in a
Time.
row
Uh-huh.
and in that time that you're allotted to do your small business, which is super. So grateful for it. I get to be at home with my little, but I also get to run a business that I love and I'm passionate about. But just like that time management thing, I think
Mhm.
sometimes as moms, we think we can do a lot, and sometimes it catches up. But it's been a huge learning curve that I'm really grateful for.
I totally relate to that feeling with just the podcast, because it's not a 9 to 5er, so it's not in a set time constraint, and then there's so much flexibility and variables that come into play for how much time I want to spend. Like, if I wanted to market more, if I wanted to expand on TikTok or YouTube, and
Right.
like interview wise if I wanted to bring more people in. Like,
Mhm.
so in one sense, it's really awesome because I get to define my own hours when I'm recording and when I'm sitting down, like thinking through questions and interviews. But on the other hand, I'm like, whew, I could quickly become over like consumed in this one area and like what is falling behind in the rest of our life.
Yes. Yeah,
So yeah,
exactly.
I relate to that. So why did you pick the name Haven Bread Co?
That's a fun question. Thank you for asking that. So haven means a safe place or a place of retreat. And um, during the time that I restarted making sourdough in December of 2021, right before then, my dad unexpectedly passed away,
Yes.
and the kitchen was my haven. Like, it was just a place that I felt safe, a place that I could go and retreat and stop
Mm,
having a bunch of thoughts, and my mind shut down, and it brought me a place where I can put my hands and create and craft beautiful things. And so
mm.
my mom and I, she actually started picking up sourdough at that time too, and we joked around during those early months of making sourdough. We were like, yeah, we're going to start a bakery in the future, and it's going to call Brian's Bakery because my
Oh, it's
dad's
your
name
dad's
was
name.
Brian.
Okay.
And he grew up a dairy farmer,
Oh,
and
okay.
then he worked in my parents' grocery store for his 30 plus years. And so he would have loved
What you're
that we were
doing.
that we were doing sourdough. So it was
Uh-huh.
just such a fun thing, and so that's why we chose Haven, is because sourdough is just a very peaceful, safe place for both my mom and I.
I like that story. That's a beautiful story.
Thank you.
And then why is it important for you to offer organic bread?
Like you guys all know, when you go into a grocery store, the bread that's sitting in the bread aisle, how many days has it been sitting there, or months it's been sitting there? Everything is
Mm,
just so ultra processed in America right now, and you just, like I said, it's ultra processed. Like, we have no idea what's in it. Yes, there's an ingredients list, but in our personal household, a lot of those words I can't even pronounce. And so when we decided to start making sourdough, I knew exactly what was in it. But for organic ingredients wise, a lot of our products or our farming practices in America have changed over time since the Industrial Revolution, and so a lot of our wheat and our grains are sprayed with glyphosate, and that is a chemical that's a neurotoxin. And so when you get organic ingredients in your bread, you know that those grains were not at least sprayed with them.
mm-hmm.
And so that is why it's super important for us to be able to eat organic bread for the health benefits. And then also that we know our 1 year old can eat this because it's not going to affect anything in his body for the most part. And so that's why it's really important for us to offer organic bread to our customers. So then they know exactly what's in it, and we are satisfied what's in it too.
Yeah. I appreciate that in your answer there because I think we shared in a different episode about like is eating healthy virtue signaling. I shared a little more our story and how I did not grow up eating organic and very poor, and so I had some really strong opinions about eating organic.
Mhm.
Like I was legit, I was on the other side of the spectrum, like annoyed by the idea, and I saw it as people just like trying to prove they had more money because they could spend more.
Yeah.
And then fast forward and making some own life changes and seeing benefits to my own
Mhm.
health. And I mean, I brazenly share that I poop once a day now where I used to poop twice a week. Like,
Yeah.
and I don't think I'm alone there. So
Yeah.
no shame. I will
Yes.
share it. But I'm telling you, like I too, I see where what we are eating is really significant to how our body's functioning.
Yeah.
And I think even like the idea for like around glyphosate is the product that we're using, it's a pesticide, right?
Yeah.
Or I don't know if it's an herbicide too, but
Mhm.
basically to kill some of the bacteria so that the plant survives and the bugs aren't attracted to it so you can get a larger harvest. There's just some interesting stuff around like the soil quality, because it's maybe preventing some bugs and bacteria from getting on the plant, but then potentially like the long term trade off there is that the plants aren't as healthy, and then the soil isn't as healthy because it's
Mhm.
killing some of the bacteria in the soil. And so it's just a really, I mean, you could get lost down the rabbit hole of information there. And I think it's really cool to see that more people are kind of just learning, and they're even willing to have the conversation and not sound like this is totally crazy.
Yeah.
But
And
I yeah.
yeah, and and we are not a complete organic family. I'm there is no shame in
Yeah.
not buying organic. But I
Uh-huh.
think there's things that you can budge on, and there's things that you have to stand firm into buying organic.
Mhm.
And there's in our household there's just some things like that. And I encourage you to look up like the Dirty Dozen and the Clean
Yes.
15, and
Yeah.
that's how you can help budget reasons. Like, this world is hard to live in sometimes right now with the economy. And so look at your choices and figure out what are the things we can budget on as a family and what are things not. And that's one of the things for us is just grains. I want them to be organic, and like our sugars, I want them to be at least organic too. So that's kind of
Mhm.
why we went that route. But like, yeah, like you were saying, just if you want to go down that that and dig deeper into that,
Yeah.
um,
And
go for
kinda
it.
yeah, like, and try it for yourself. I guess that's where at the end of the day, that's where for me, it just came from, like,
Mhm.
applying a couple things open my eyes to just being like, "Oh, maybe this isn't entirely off the deep end, or maybe this isn't just a virtue signaling, I have the money so I can spend more.
Mhm.
Maybe there's like legitimate things that as I kind of explored myself, I kind of
Yeah.
just saw differences in the way my body acted
Yeah.
when I paid attention to what I ate. So
I love
I
that.
appreciate that it's organic. Okay, do you have aspirations to expand your operations?
Um, we right now are currently expanding our menu, just trying to offer more kind of like seasonal flavors or monthly flavors. That's kind of what we're doing right now. Is the this year in 2024, we're gonna try to have like a new item every month and swap out an old item. Or right now, like last month, we did a roasted garlic cheddar loaf, and this month we're doing a pizza sourdough loaf.
Mhm.
So we're doing that kind of thing for expansion. And then in the next few months, we'd love to expand our quantities that we get to offer. So our huge goal this year is to be able to produce more quantities of bread,
Mhm.
so get into that 50 to 60 loaf range a week.
Mhm.
And so that would be like buying a bread oven and buying maybe a commercial mixer. And so
Mm.
all being in our home and still being a cottage bakery. So right now, I don't think in the near future expanding to like a brick and mortar. I think right now I've really enjoyed having that balance of being able to be a mom and intentional with my little, but also and also wanting to grow our family in the future.
Mhm.
And then also being a small business owner who still is can be an intentional and put that as a huge priority while and nurturing it and still having energy at the end of the day for my family.
Mhm. The time commitment and some flexibility by not becoming a brick and mortar. I
Yes.
gotcha. Okay, so you mentioned that you kind of do flavors of the month and such. What has been your favorite variety or favorite varieties of sourdough that you've made so far?
Yeah. I have really loved I love our original loaf. Like just the plain Jane original. It's probably my favorite. It's just so versatile. Like you can throw
You can
some.
put whatever you want on
Yeah,
it. Yeah.
yes, you can eat it with pasta at the end of the night. You can eat it with your eggs in the morning. You can make a sandwich. But I have really loved so like making actually. The pizza loaf has been really fun. So during stretch and folds, we add in our uncured pepperoni and our cheddar. And then during shaping, I actually slather on the marinara and Italian herbs and the mozzarella. and it's
Okay.
just it's an art. It's just, to me, it's just so
It's kind of
fun.
like a nice add it's like
Yes.
having Play-Doh with sprinkles added
Yes,
into it.
it's grown
You're
up
like,
Play-Doh.
"Ooh, this is cool."
It's super, yeah, it's
And
just really
flavorful.
fun. So all those inclusion loaves are really fun to me. And then I love making our desserts. My mom is more so that gal who does our cookies and our brownies. And that's just super fun. And I just love doing it with her. It's really fun.
Nice. Okay, how would you encourage a listener that has never considered buying bread from a small baker or somewhere other than a grocery store to give this a try and support a small local business or head to the farmer's market and pick up bread from a local person?
Yeah. I would encourage you guys all to buy sourdough from your local bakery or a local microbakery in your neighborhood, because to me it's a healthier option, and you're also supporting small. And that's just such a huge thing of supporting a small business, is you're supporting a lot of just like intentionality and love that that small business and that family puts behind their products. I grew up in a home that my parents owned a grocery store, and before that, that was my grandparents' grocery store. And
Mhm.
so I've always been a part of the small business, and just supporting a small business is just huge, because you're not supporting those mass produced corporations that throw their bread on the shelf, that they don't really care who's eating it at the end of the
Mhm.
day. They are just kind of looking for those money signs at the end of the month. And
Yeah.
so I really would encourage you to support small, but also the benefits of sourdough is to find a micro bakery near you, or a bakery in town that truly only has the ingredients in their bread of wheat, water, and salt. Because there are bakeries who put a sourdough flavoring or other things that they can still label it as sourdough bread,
Mm,
but it's truly not three ingredients. So really
okay.
look for that, and really try to support those local bakeries or micro bakeries. They are popping up if you look for them, and because you know where the ingredients come from, and there's a lot of intentionality put behind the product.
Mhm. I like, the idea just the level of separation, and it kinda goes into all of our food supply is in just where we're at with, service economy, like, we're all in service or we just do jobs, and then food is just, super reliable, and you can go to the grocery store, but there is, like, a level of separation from what it takes to make food
Mhm.
or who's involved in doing it, and
Mhm.
so I think that for us is like kind of part of why we value just
Yeah.
taking a local option when possible or growing a garden and
Yeah.
just
And
being closer to your food supply. There's
yeah.
something kind of beautiful about that and the relational aspect. So,
Yeah, and I think, like you were saying, of that relational aspect, or and even just supporting local. Of like, I love the fact that micro bakeries are popping up everywhere, and since we're a micro bakery, it's kind of like supporting your local farmer. Of like, I know myself and other people in my community, like they're like, yeah, I have my egg guy, and I have
mhm,
my milk guy, and I go and buy a half cow from someone. Like, we want to be that weekly bread provider for families who can have simple ingredient bread and bakes on their table weekly, just like how you would go and pick up, a dozen of eggs from their farmer down the road, or go buy a
mhm,
half cow from someone. So,
mhm.
yeah, that's kind of where I'm thinking about it too.
We're winding down. We enjoy book reading. It lets people dive deeper into a single topic. And we think that that really models thinking nuanced and holding loosely to expectations and diving deep into a topic. So, with that said, do you have a book recommendation related to today's show?
Yeah, I've loved the book Artesian Sourdough Made Simple, by Emily Raffa, and it's a beautiful book, and it just is um, a great book to just show you the steps of kind of what we talked about today with sourdough, and then also provide you some really great recipes. And then also, I'm a big podcast gal, just because I, listen to them in the car. But Ancient Health Nutrition podcast by Josh Axe is my go to for a lot of health and nutrition related things.
Okay. And last but not least, for anyone who is tuning in and they live in the Jacksonville area, how can they connect with you to order their next loaf of bread?
Yeah, I we would absolutely love that. We are on social media on Instagram and Facebook at Haven Bread Co. And you can find us there. Our menu drops since we are a microbakery. Our menu is not open to ordering all days of the week. So we drop our menu every Sunday, and it is open until Tuesday afternoon. And if you order between Sunday and Tuesday, you can pick up your bread Thursday afternoon, freshly baked that morning in either St. John's or Mandarin. That link to order, I'll give it so we can put it in the show notes, but also it is in our link in our bio on all of our social media platforms.
Okay. Awesome. Well, Breanna, thank you so much for joining me today. I think this was a fun combo, and I think people will totally resonate with what I'm trying to pull out with the nuanced beauty that it is making sourdough.
Yeah, well, thank you so much for having me. It's been fun.
Thanks for joining us today. I hope you enjoyed this episode, and in the spirit of nuance, I hope you found something that you could agree with and you could disagree with, and still choose to lean in. Give us a follow, rating, and review, and consider sharing this episode with a friend to continue the dialogue and help us grow. Until next time.